now to the place in Shiloh, where I first made a dwelling for my name, and see what I did to it because of the wickedness of my people Israel. But look, there is the annual festival of the Lord in Shiloh, which lies north of Bethel, east of the road that goes from Bethel to Shechem, and south of Libonah. In our previous episodes about Samaria, we have seen the progress of Joshua's conquest of the land. From crossing the Jordan, capturing Jericho, the dramatic battles at Ai, reaching Shechem, saddled between Ebal and Gerizim, for the blessings and the curses, followed by the battles fought to capture the northern and the southern part of the Promised Land, except for the land of the Philistines. 14 years have passed since the Israelites crossed the Jordan. In the book of Joshua, chapter 18, first verse, we are told, "And the whole community of the children of Israel assembled at Shiloh, and set up the tent of meeting. And the land was under their control." It was in Shiloh where Joshua casted lots in the presence of the Lord, and divided the land amid the remaining 7 tribes. The tent of meeting was the portable structure erected by Moses after the exodus from Egypt, in fulfillment of biblical injunction, "And let them make me a temple, and I shall dwell among them." Its central feature was the Mishkan, which is usually translated in English as the Tabernacle. The Mishkan consisted of 2 covered chambers. The first was the Holy of Holies, which is in Hebrew, Kodesh HaKodeshim, measuring 10 cubits by 10 cubits, separated the Holy of Holies by the veil, which is in Hebrew, the Paroshet. On its eastern side was the second chamber of the Mishkan, the holy place, which is Kodesh in Hebrew, a rectangle 20 cubits long and 10 cubits wide. The Ark of the Covenant, containing the 2 stone tablets of the law given to Moses on Mount Sinai, was placed in the Holy of Holies. The tabernacle was set in an open rectangular court together with the altar of the sacrifice on the east and the laver. The terminology can be a little confusing because sometimes the tabernacle is named the tent of meeting, as, for example, in Exodus chapter 40, verse 7, "I shall call the whole structure, including the surrounding court, the tent of meeting," as also in Exodus chapter 33. The tent of meeting was the prototype of the first and second temples in Jerusalem, especially the former. For 369 years, Shiloh was the spiritual capital of Israel, at a time when Israel was divided into tribes ruled by prophets and judges. Obviously, being here at Shiloh the question would be, where did the tent of meeting stood? Archaeologists, as usual, are divided upon the location. As it is said, bring 2 archaeologists and then you get 3 opinions. Some suggest it to have stood right here on the top of the hill. Some see its location right where the Byzantine churches were later built at the southern hill, and others think that it's right here below us on the northern side of the hill. Let's go exploring Shiloh and see where the house of the Lord might have stood. Shiloh was first excavated by Danish expedition in 1920s, and then it was extensively excavated in 1980s by Finkelstein. But the current excavations that we see around us are the work of ABR, headed by Professor Stripling. Different layers or stratas were revealed, 9 of them, going to 1800 BC all the way to the late Islamic periods. The latest archaeological excavations are focusing on the walls of the city. Where we are, right here, this might be a place where a gate was found at the northern part of the city, date back to the 13th up to the 11th century BC. That led probably of where the meeting tent stood. Our archaeological focus here is at the period of Joshua, the Judges era. Eli, or Eli, the high priest, Hannah and her husband Elkanah, and their son, the prophet Samuel. As 20% of the site was excavated, we can tell from the findings that a 26 feet high wall, a massive one, made out of stones, supported by glacis, encircled the 3 or 4 acres city. As Joshua approached the city, he might have seen those walls that would give, for many different generations later, especially the Levites and the priests, as a refuge place where they dwelt in the city. The jewel in the crown. Could this be the spot where the meeting tent stood within this rectangular space oriented east-west? If so, then I'm standing at the eastern entrance of the meeting tent, which leads to the outer courtyard. Just imagine a house constructed of boards, series of boards of shittim wood or acacia wood, plated with gold, fastened firmly all together with bars made out of the same wood, also covered with gold. At its center stood the sacrificial altar that led to the Mishkan, the inner sanctuary. The mountains surrounding us, which is probably the place where the Israelites gathered to celebrate the 3 Jewish feasts here in Shiloh. The Passover, the Shavuot, and the Tabernacles. In addition to that, the feast of Tu B'Av, which is celebrated in the 15th of August, according to the Jewish calendar, lunar calendar. Actually, it commemorates when the tribe of Benjamin were allowed to intermarry with other tribes. This is written in the book of Judges, chapter 19 through 21, and the selecting of brides took place here in the vineyards of the valley below us, Libona Valley. For 16 generations, the Mishkan stood here. Eli, the high priest, a prophet and a judge, was the last to preside in Shiloh. Scripture describes him sitting on his special chair by the door of the sanctuary. One day, he saw a woman standing whose lips were moving, but who made no sound. He rose and approached her angrily as she wept and whispered in the holy shrine, saying, "I think you had too much wine." Probably this was the feast of Tu B'Av, or Tabernacle feast, as people drank too much wine, rejoicing, celebrating the feast of the Lord. "No," said the woman bitterly, "it is my soul which is bitter. I've come to beseech the Lord. I live not far off, and my name is Hannah. I came to Shiloh every year with my husband Elkanah. I love my husband, but I have waited so long for a child. I would dedicate him to the Lord and never cut his hair. I swear." Eli was impressed by Hannah's sincerity. "May God grant what you have asked for. Go in peace." Hannah returned to her hometown in Ramah. She gets pregnant and bears a son that she called Samuel. And when the child was 2 years old, she brought him back to Eli here at Shiloh, fulfilling her vow, dedicating the child to the Lord to assist Eli. Samuel grew up here in Shiloh, and Eli taught him well. He became a provider and a judge for Israel in peace and war. He anointed Saul, Israel's first king, and David, his successor. In this place, he had a dream which prophesied the death of Eli's two evil sons, Hophni and Phinehas, who died at the battle of Ebenezer. And when the messenger doing his marathon run from the battlefield to Shiloh, going through the city, reaching Eli, telling him about the death of his two kids, and Eli slips or falls off his high chair, breaking his spine, and he died. The ark was in the hands of the Philistines, and even when returned 3 months later, it won't get back to Shiloh. It wanders for 2 generations before David would bring it to Jerusalem. The meeting tent as well, we hear that it was moved from Shiloh to Gibeah. As Psalms number 78, verse 60 mentions, he abandoned the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent he had set up among humans. A chain of storerooms built in walls and outside walls, with a great collection of round-rimmed colorful jars called pitoi or pitoi, which held the tithe offerings of the Israelites given to the house of the Lord. Storage rooms, bone deposits. A lot of discoveries of artifacts create a close association in the archaeological data with the biblical text. After the Philistines destroyed Shiloh, it was occupied once again in the 9th century BC, then destroyed at the hands of the Assyrians in 723 BC. Israelites taken to exile. Jeremiah the prophet make an example of Shiloh to the inhabitants of Jerusalem. Punishment to sin is the demise of the temple and the presence of God amid them. Shiloh was continuously inhabited, keeping the same name as we do see evidence of Hellenistic settlement, then a settlement from the time of Jesus with mikveh remains on top of the hill. And perhaps a Roman cultic center stood here in the 2nd century AD. The Byzantine Christians venerated this sacred area since it was the dwelling place of God, building at least 3-4 churches. The one we see, its remains in front of us, topped by a Muslim mosque, had a mosaic inscription that mentions residents of Siloam, the Greek name of Shiloh. Amid the ruins, we can see the remains of 4-horn altar in second use, with 1 horn left. Another basilica discovered in 1920s with its foundation left almost intact has colorful mosaics to include a motif of the Star of David. In the book of Genesis, chapter 49, verse 10, it says, "The scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he to whom it belongs shall come, and the obedience of the nations shall be his." Shiloh in Genesis refers to the Messiah. The name reference has no common ground with ancient Shiloh. However, ancient Shiloh is the place where God's presence dwelt, where Samuel the prophet grew up, bringing, in a way, a message of redemption. Our Shiloh is our Redeemer. Samuel, his birth is like that of John the Baptist. Magnificat of Elizabeth is similar to Hannah's prayer, presentation of Jesus at the temple, like Samuel at Shiloh meeting tent. Jesus' family took a yearly pilgrimage to temple like Samuel's parents to Shiloh. Jesus' increase in wisdom, just same words like Samuel. Samuel remarks about the priest misinterpret sacrifice halakha almost brought to his death, except that Hannah interceded for him like Jesus' discussion at the temple. It's like Samuel's gift, foreshadowing of the boy prophet Jesus. Jewish tradition says, where God's house stood and incense burned at it, even today, if you sniff the air, you can still smell the sweet burnt incense.